My name is José Velasco. I am a 68-year-old American citizen, and I have a story to tell you that may shock you, and most of you probably will not believe. However, let me warn you, every single word that I am going to say to you is true. And the reason I am making this recording is so that we can avoid what happened to me from happening to you or your children. Let this be a warning. Please listen carefully. At 6 o'clock in the morning, on the 29th of April, 2012, a small army of men in black, there were 4 ATF officers, there were 2 United States Marshals, who raided my home. I was taken in chains 210 miles to a court in Kansas City, Kansas, where the prosecutor actually told the judge that I was a danger to the community and a flight risk. I was thrown with 11 other people in what they termed a conspiracy to send guns to the cartels in Mexico.
Jose, can you tell us a little bit about your experience with the ATF when they first came to your house?
Well, it was 6:30 in the morning. The door rang. My wife answered the ring, and there were 6 officers. There were 4 ATF. There were 2 marshals. They claimed they wanted to talk to me. They came up. I was still asleep. I had worked till 4 o'clock in the morning. They shined this incredibly bright light in my face. They told me that I had to come down with them, and they were going to talk to me. And they started a discussion on some people that they had arrested, and that I was part of a conspiracy to provide cartels with weapons.
Mexican cartels?
Yes, drug cartels in Mexico. So I thought it was a joke.
Oh, yeah.
I said, "Now, what are you talking about? I think you got the wrong person. Who do you want?" So they said, "Is this your name?" I said, "Yes, it is my name." So they said, "Okay, it is you who we want to talk to." I talked to the senior officer, and I told him, there is a gun rug for each and every single pistol. There is a case or a gun sock for each and every single one of the rifles. There are 3 large sleeping bags that I want you to use. Layer the weapons in between, resting on those sleeping bags. You are allowed, I'll do it in writing if you need it, to take all of the covers from all of the beds in my home to cradle my guns and keep them in good shape. When my wife returned from work, every single pistol had been taken out of the rugs, out of the gun rugs that were in the safe. All of those gun rugs were littered in the garage. Not a single case was taken for the rifles. And my next door neighbor who saw them load a van with my weapons tells me that they took them by the handload and just dumped them in the back of the truck. These weapons are certainly not the Walmart type weapons. Most of them are between $4,000 and $5,000 a piece. You cannot just go to the store and find them. You have to order them. Some of those weapons took 5 years to complete, and they are most certainly not a standard weapon.
How old are most of your weapons?
Most of the rifles are somewhere between 1891 and 1951. So they're over 60 years old, the newest.
So these are antique pieces of history then.
And yeah, vintage pieces of history when gun makers were one of a kind. And the nearer ones are also one of a kind. My grandchildren's name are engraved on the guns. My wife's name are engraved on their guns. My names are engraved on the guns. So I asked them, does it make any sense to you that I would be sending guns to cartels that have the names of my grandchildren, my wife, and myself on them? And they didn't answer my question.
I see.
I also have very old guns that are incredibly well made by masters that did them one at a time, no longer mass produced like today. They were done one at a time, and they are so beautiful, so well made, and so accurate that they're treasures, they're jewels. They interviewed me for over 4 hours. At the end of the 4 hours, the marshal was in a big hurry to get to Kansas City, Kansas, and that is about 200 miles from my home. I live in Wichita. He then proceeded to put the handcuffs on me. I asked him not to be displayed in chains in front of my neighbors, which of course was ignored. And then we got in this rather smelly car of theirs and drove at a high rate of speed to Kansas City, Kansas. I must say that the officer was doing over 100 miles an hour sometimes, and I was quite disturbed on it, because if we had an accident, I'm chained, my chances of survival would have been much less. And when we finally got there, I had more chains put on me, and my feet, my waist. The handcuffs were locked to the chains that were in my waist, and then we went in to face the prosecutor and the judge.
And how did that go?
The prosecutor started making some unbelievable claims of stuff that I had done, and actually asked the judge that I be retained in custody because of two reasons. Because I was a danger to the community, and because I was a flight risk. As far as a danger to the community, in 66 years at the time, I had 4 speeding tickets, which is way less than the average. And that did not constitute me as a danger to the community, and I was being treated like a John Dillinger or any one of those famous bank robbers or killers of the days, in the 30s, where people were killing each other in the streets en masse.
Now, how many other people were involved in this operation that included you?
Well, the so-called conspiracy consisted of 12 people, and it was divided pretty evenly down racial lines. There were 6 Hispanics, including myself, and there were 6 Caucasians. Every single one of the Hispanics was taken to prison. Every single one of the Caucasians were given bail immediately. And I did ask the judge to consider the fact that I was not. I asked him, why is it that we Hispanics are flight risks and none of the Caucasians are flight risks who have been given bail? Do they not have family and friends? Can they not hop on their car and flee? Why is it easier for us to do so than for them? Now the prosecutor said, well, you're definitely going to be fleeing to another country, which we would be inclined not to. I mean, it's going to be very difficult for us to go get you back. And I said, well, the Caucasians they know where the border is, and I'm sure that they can travel there as quickly as we can. And I do not really see the difference. But the judge just overlooked my comments and ordered that I be detained the same as the other Hispanics. And on we go on a paddy wagon to a federal prison.
How long did you stay in this federal prison?
Well, after about a month, I requested my attorney to make a motion to ask for bail. And we went back to the courthouse, many strips to total nakedness later. We got to the courthouse, and I was summarily refused, and I was to remain in prison. And 4.5 months later, I made another request, and I was granted a hearing. And to my fortune, we found that the judge was different. It had been the same at the very beginning in the first request, so then this third request was with a different judge. The prosecutor very arrogantly pointed her finger at me and told me that I wanted my guns back and I wanted to free them so I can continue my nefarious, illegal, international trafficking of guns. Now, I, on the other hand, gave pictures of my weapons and statements that my weapons are, while I do have 2 or 3 pistols for self-defense, most of them are either hunting or target. In fact, the predominant amount is for target. And the judge looked at my weapons, looked at my records, and looked at the statements of the prosecutor and granted bail. For quite a long time, I did not understand why the prosecutor was so bound and determined to keep me in prison, even if she had no evidence against me. Well, the answer is very simple. You cannot fight the system from the inside of a prison. All your rights have been taken away from you. There is no way to research data. There are no people to talk to. There's no people like you that I can convey my story to that can help. So, yes, she was very keen in keeping me in there, but fortune was on my side. I got a different judge, and I was granted bail. Now, I am outside. What else can the prosecutor do to make things unfair for me? Well, I guess they have had several years to perfect their system. What did they do? They denied access to the charges against me. If I don't know what the charges against me are, how in the hell can I possibly defend against them? I talked to my attorney. He says, look, I need to have my discovery, the charges against me, at home. The way the system works now is this. They give part of my charges to my attorney. My attorney happened to be 210 miles away from me. He is in Missouri. I am in Wichita, Kansas. 210 miles in between. That, my friends, is a huge barrier. I began to ask him to make some motions to the court. There were a total of 10 motions. And out of 10 motions, 0 were granted, 10 were denied. All right, and those motions were very simple. Let me have the charges against me at my home so I can read every single one of them, listen to every single one of them, and see what the hell they have in hand. And I will give you one example of one that I found out at the very end. After 7 months of keeping my firearms, they determined that 13 of them, which were made in Europe, were not import marked. So the prosecutor made that a charge, one of the 5 charges against me. And it is more telling because, number one, I wrote to the BATF in Washington, D.C., and they answered me and told me that owning a firearm that is not import mark is not a criminal offense if you are not the importer, if you are just a purchaser. And none of them were identified. They were written as manufacturer unknown, model unknown, caliber unknown, and even in some cases serial number unknown. The same for each of the 13 guns. Now, that tells me the officers who looked at those guns are completely incompetent. The most prevalent firearm in the world is the Mauser. Well, and maybe now the AK-47 has taken its place, but it's either the first or the second most manufactured gun in the world. They did not know what it was. They did not know what they were. Amazing. And before this happened, I thought ATF were the experts in the civilian firearms world. My dear friends, they are not. They're just a bunch of liars. Now, the prosecutor did not know the law. It is not illegal to own a weapon that is not import marked. How many of our veterans came back from the war with some of these weapons and never import marked them? And it was perfectly legal for them to do so. Now, if their widows or children sell those guns to others, it will not be import marked. So what is the recipient going to do? Is he a criminal because he has now a gun that is not import marked? No, they are not. It is only the importer in this day and age who does not mark them that becomes a criminal. I talked to you about the 10 motions that my attorney and I made, which were denied. And let me tell you what some of them were. I requested approval for me to travel. I was confined to the city of Wichita. If I wanted to leave the city of Wichita, I had to request permission, which was only granted by the prosecutor, which, of course, that is the equivalent of making Dracula the overseer of the blood bank. And I requested to visit some of my potential witnesses, people who knew me, people who were relevant to my defense on some of the counts that were against me. Denied. 3 requests for 3 different people. I also requested permission to go to Washington, D.C. and have an interview with the group in D.C. that had responded to my letters that exonerated me from the charges that being levied against me. And that was denied. I was told that because I was under indictment, I was forbidden to contact BATF. Is that being innocent until proven guilty? I had not been to court. I was preparing to go to court. And the information that the BATF in Washington, D.C. had was vital to my cases, to my defense of the several cases. How can it possibly be denied? How can I possibly be forbidden to contact an organization which is paid for by the taxpayer? I'm a taxpayer, as you are. Why should I be forbidden to access them when they have the information that would set me free? I was charged with 5 felony charges, pretty serious felony charges. A Class B 2 Class B felonies and 3 Class C felonies, very high up the ladder. I guess the only thing higher than that was attempt on the life of a president, or maybe high treason. Then sending guns to cartels are a lower level, but very, very high. So I was looking at 30 years. I was then offered the lowest felony charge, which means a maximum, 3 years maximum. I had already done 4.5 months, so that left me 2.5. Good behavior would bring that down to less. Half of that would be done in a farm. The other half would be done in a halfway house. I was able to see my wife, reported at night and was able to leave early in the morning. I could have a job. I could visit my family if given approval. A lot of, quote, benefits. Now, there was a downside, of course, that I had to sign myself as guilty, accept responsibility for my guilt, and become a felon for the rest of my life. And, some people find that easy to take. 3 years against 30 is a very, very easy choice to make.
Well, what does being a felon actually mean?
Well, a felon means that whenever you look for a job, you have to state that you have been a criminal, and a felony means a charge that is more than 1 year in prison. And that's number one. You can never own a gun again in your life. You can never be near a gun again in your life. And several other very difficult items to live with. You will have a load on you for the rest of your life. You have to identify yourself as a criminal whenever you... Oh, another thing, you can never get a loan from the government to start a business. You can never work for the federal government. There are several other things that you can never get. So it is a very big load. For a person that is innocent, I just cannot believe accepting anything. But many people do. And that is why our prisons are full of people that are innocent.
So, Jose, tell me more about this diversion document.
Diversion document is a means by which people that are very low in the criminal scale with misdemeanors are able to expunge their criminality, I should say, or their wrongdoing, such as people who are caught speeding, people who are caught the first time drunk driving, something similar to that does not reach the level of a felony. Now, the reason it doesn't make any sense in my case, because I am charged with 5 very high caliber felonies. In fact, 2 B level felonies and 3 C level felonies. Very high, all 5. And they're giving me a diversion agreement. It does not make sense because a felon, no matter what the felony is, as long as they are a felon, could never own a handgun or come near a handgun or a rifle, a firearm of any kind. Now, I will be given all of my guns back. In fact, there is a court order to return all my guns to me. So right there, there's a big disconnect between a felony and a diversion agreement because they're giving me all my guns back. In other words, they're treating me as less than a felony while charging me with high caliber felonies. There are other advantages of a diversion agreement over a plea agreement. For example, I am no longer indicted. I am now out of the indictment process. I do not have a probation officer. I can travel through the states of Missouri and Kansas on my own recognizance. There are many advantages and no disadvantages. And in a sense, it just sees how stupid this thing is. They're going to give me my guns back, and a felon cannot own guns or hold guns in their hands in any way. Another amazing thing to me is that the defense attorneys, who in my opinion should be totally independent, are pretty much controlled by the prosecutor. She is the one, or he is the one, who issues the contracts for defense attorneys to take cases. So obviously, if a defense attorney steps on the toes of the prosecutor, he's not ever going to see another case in his life. It should be independent. It cannot be dependent upon the prosecutor issuing those contracts. They are made to sign another agreement whereby they are not to be making copies of the discovery, in other words, the charges and the evidence against a defendant, and given to the defendant. They can only see it, parts of it, in the office of the attorney. And in my case, he was 210 miles from my home. In 2 full years, I was able only to go and see him 4 times, both because of money constraints and also because my attorney, who had dozens of other cases, was not able to see me when I wanted him to see me. So, they just put so many obstacles that now I'm beginning to understand why people just take a plea and forget about all of the problems that you encountered if you try to defend yourself. It's easier just to take a 3-year conviction or a 3-year agreement where you're not going to... In my case, I was given 2 choices. Either 30 years on the one end if I defended myself and found guilty, or 3 years if I didn't, and I would not ever see the inside of a prison. I would go to like a farm. I don't remember how they described it. I was not listening because I was not interested in a plea agreement, but it seemed like a lot better than 30 years inside a federal prison. How can they get away with it? And what can we do about it? I suppose the only thing we can do about it is to contact your senators and congressmen, and for you to contact my senators and congressmen. Tell them what is happening. Tell them that we need to change the system. Tell them that what they're doing in the federal courts is impossible to accept anymore. 99% conviction rate is what they have. Why do they have such a high conviction rate? My friends, there is no such thing as a 99% perfect justice system. Many of those people are innocent, but unwilling to fight back. When they're facing 30 years, as I was, and they make them an offer of 3 to 5 years, they're going to take it. Not because they're guilty, but because they are afraid. And they're paying the consequences. Let us help them help themselves. Let us have their sentences reviewed. Let those free people go free. They deserve it. And let's do it for them, but we're also doing it for ourselves. If we must leave a better system for our children. I'm 68. My life is near over, but I have children and grandchildren, and so do you. What happened to me cannot happen to the rest of us. 99% conviction rate, that is insane. They don't believe it themselves. And yet they're doing it. Why? Because of pride and because they want a better job, and that is that's the path that they have taken to get it. I have convicted 99% of the felons of this world that have federal cases. That's what my prosecutor is going to tell you. What we're going to tell her is, you are a corrupt individual. You have abused your power. You have condemned to prison people who are innocent, and a vast majority, or at least a vast percentage of them. So my friends, call your congressman, call your senators, call my congressmen and senators,